Alright, so it's almost Halloween, and I figured there's no better time to make this video than right now. And also, if I don't make this video right now, then it's probably not gonna come out till next October, because that's just how my brain works. I'm by no means an expert when it comes to the genre of horror, but I love horror movies, and I think I have a fair share of the essentials under my belt, so I feel pretty comfortable about making a solidified top 6. Why 6 instead of 5? I don't know. It doesn't really matter, and I think it pretty much goes without saying that I'm not claiming that these are objectively the best horror films ever made. They're my personal favorites, so don't shit the bed. And before getting into the main list, I do have one honorable mention, and that is Perfect Blue. Now, the reason it's an honorable mention and not on the actual list is simply because I was going off what Letterboxd has listed as a horror movie. Apparently, Perfect Blue is not listed as a horror movie on Letterboxd. Maybe it's a dumb criteria for me to follow, but I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you think Perfect Blue is a horror movie? It has a lot of horror elements, and of course it's anime and it's sort of in its own medium, but if we're counting it as a horror movie, then it probably would rank fairly high on this list. It's a great film. It's one of my favorite animated films ever made. Satoshi Kon has clearly had a very significant influence on 20th century filmmaking. One of the most obvious proteges is Darren Aronofsky. Am I using that word right? What's the definition of protege?
Here's the definition of protege: a person who is guided and supported by an older and more experienced or influential person.
Not really. That's not really how you would use it. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the top 6. And at number 6, I have Videodrome, which I already have an entire video on, so if you want to know my more in-depth analysis and thoughts on the film, you can go watch the video. It's maybe I'll stick it up here, or I don't remember which side of the screen that little thing appears on, but it'll be up there somewhere or in the description, and you can watch it for yourself, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with any of these films. I'm not going to spoil any of the films in this video. The director of Videodrome, David Cronenberg, is like the essential body horror guy, so if that's your thing, this should definitely be on your list if it isn't already. I think it's a pretty decent starting point for his filmography. It was where I started. I think he's probably most well known for The Fly, but Videodrome also has those amazing practical effects and makeup, which is one of the biggest draws to his type of horror. And Videodrome in itself isn't really like a scary film, it's more so unnerving in its thematic elements. It's very foreboding in its prophecy of how it sees the future of media, and it has a lot of very interesting commentary on media and how it shapes us, how it exacerbates certain aspects of the human condition. That all sounds very pretentious, and it's because I am kind of pretentious. It's really worth a watch, and I'm sure plenty of you have already seen it. The first time I saw it, I didn't fall in love with it right away. It took me another viewing and also making that video for me to finally come around to it and really realize how interesting it actually is. Fuck, there's a fucking police. This is what happens when you live downtown. If you've ever read any Marshall McLuhan, his influence is all over the film. Okay. At number wait, what are we at? 5? At number 5, I have Funny Games, which is like one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen, which is something that I already kind of anticipated going into it because it's directed by Michael Haneke, who I was first introduced to through The Piano Teacher. So those are the only 2 films of his that I've seen, The Piano Teacher and Funny Games. And yeah, they're both like equally fucked up. If you like Ari Aster, he's clearly been influenced by Michael Haneke, and I think he's cited him as an influence. But yeah, Funny Games isn't like the most traditional horror film. It's more of like a thriller suspense with horror elements. Without spoiling anything, basically all you need to know is that it's a home invasion film and it's very disturbing. I think what's unique about Haneke's style of filmmaking is his patience with the camera. He'll linger on a shot for like 5 minutes or even longer than that, and just have you sit in the horror that you're watching unfold. I think this is one of those films that is much better seen without knowing too much going into it. It also has an English remake, which is also directed by Michael Haneke. I haven't seen it, but apparently it's like very much like the same movie. I don't know if I would condone watching that first. I think like it's good to go with the original, but I mean, that's up to you. At number 4, I have a film that very much influenced, I think, my taste in horror films and really opened my eyes to the type of film that can be made within this genre, and that is Rosemary's Baby. And yes, I know, not exactly the film you want to be co-signing when it comes to the guy who made it. If you're familiar with who Roman Polanski is, you know what I'm talking about. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate thing that such a great film was made by a pretty terrible person. There's a couple other films of his that I really love, but I can't deny the influence that this had on me early on, seeing it for the first time. It's a film that helped me realize that horror doesn't have to be like super scary or filled with jump scares to convey a sense of unease, and that's really what this film is. It's very unsettling. Mia Farrow is brilliant as the lead, and you just feel like you're going crazy with her. Like you as the audience are being gaslit and you're kind of trying to pick apart and figure out what's going on. It's definitely a bit of a slow burn. The whole film is predicated on the deceiving of the main character and what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. The horror of the film is basically centered around distrust. It's basically about a couple that moves into a new apartment, and Rosemary, the main character, is pregnant with their child, and from that point on there's some strange happenings. At number 3 is the most obvious pick on this list, and that is The Shining, directed by Stanley Kubrick, a film that I'm sure everybody is already familiar with. It's iconic, and after rewatching it recently, I have an even greater appreciation for it because it's just such a groundbreaking film for the genre. At one point, I would have considered it my favorite horror film, but then I watched the 2 that I ranked above this one. I think the one thing that is a bit frustrating for a lot of people with The Shining is its ambiguity, and yeah, it does feel a little bit nonsensical with how it concludes things, but I think that's part of why I love the film so much. It actually leaves a lot open for interpretation, which I think makes it a lot more rewatchable as well. And also just the imagery is like ingrained in my mind. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like people also don't talk about the soundtrack of this film enough. The Shining is a really good soundtrack. Of course, if you like the film, you already know that, but I feel like it doesn't get like the same praise as other horror soundtracks, like Halloween, for instance. Even though I think it's on that tier, it really is just such an inventive film. And that brings us to number 2. And like Funny Games, this film is also not like the most conventionally horror. Not that it's like similar to Funny Games, I think this one's quite different, but it isn't exactly like a scary film. I'm talking about Cure, by the way, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. This film is a technical masterpiece. The cinematography and sound design create such an effective atmosphere, and really, if we're talking about atmosphere, I think this one is like cream of the crop. So much of the unsettling aspects of the film stem from its technical prowess. It's beautifully lit, the camera work is very patient, similar to Haneke's filmmaking, and it's sort of like if Tarkovsky directed a horror film. Maybe that's like a weird way to put it, but that's kind of the vibe I get, and I'm a big fan of Tarkovsky's films, so this one definitely scratches a certain itch for me. But the screenplay is also very intricate. It's dabbling in a lot of interesting themes like identity and personhood. I was thinking of maybe making an entire video on this film, but some people kind of beat me to it. To give you the reductive summary of the film, it's about a detective that's trying to figure out why everybody is committing murder just completely unprovoked, and there is a supernatural element in the film, and I think that's what kind of wedges itself into the horror genre, whereas if it didn't have that, then maybe it'd be considered more of like a psychological thriller, where it's definitely a mix between the two. I think some people have compared it to like Seven, which, you know, I don't know if like I would make that comparison. Sure, like if you like Seven, you would probably like Cure. It's definitely a very influential film, as I've said with basically every film on this list. But yeah, Cure, even if you're not a fan of horror, like, give this one a shot. Give this one a shot. It's got a lot of interesting philosophical elements. Ooh. Ah. Oh my god. Okay. And finally, that brings me to the number one film on this list, which I guess I would say is my favorite horror film, and that is Possession. Directed by Andrzej Zulawski, this is one of the best breakup films ever made. And that's the thing about my list. You might notice a bit of a pattern in terms of the type of horror movies that I enjoy. Interestingly enough, there happens to be 3 films on this list that involve a married couple going insane. So I don't know what that says about me. Possession has one of my favorite performances of all time from Isabelle Adjani. It is just so insane. The acting is so over the top, but it works. There's really like no film like this one. It's just so absurd, and it just so does not care about the rules of performance or convention. Somehow like borders on camp, but it isn't. It's so insane. Also, Sam Neill is great in the film as well. There's a bit of body horror in the mix. Describing this one is just, it feels like a disservice, to be honest. It's like you just kind of gotta watch it. I understand why some people wouldn't love this film, but it's so apparent why it has the acclaim that it does. I'm never gonna forget the first time I saw it. I was genuinely caught off guard because I had no idea what the film was about, and that first viewing, it quickly became one of my favorite films ever. I still haven't seen Zulawski's other films because they're actually kind of hard to find, but this one is his most accessible and the one that he's most known for. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, and I'm quarter Polish, so it's kind of embarrassing. Really, all you need to know is Adjani is iconic. This is one of those films that you should watch and make it your personality. Make it your whole personality that this is your favorite film, because if any film deserves that, it's this one. That basically concludes it. I don't know. I don't know what this video is. I feel like I needed to talk about something for Halloween. It's such a fun time of year, and you really can't go wrong with horror movies. It's just, I don't know, I felt obligated to make this video, even though no one asked for it. But here it is. You made it to the end of the video, so you might as well leave a like and you might as well subscribe. YouTube added a new animation on the subscribe button and the like button, so, you know, give it a try. Sorry for this very low effort video. I'll have a review of the new David Fincher film hopefully out soon. But yeah, thanks for watching.